So now we're going to move on to something that I know that incoming District 5190 International Chair, John, who has joined us today, is going to really love. This is a program that I just recently learned about. And I was fascinated to hear this story because it really empowered the Rotary from the Heart theme. And it really empowered the incoming Rotary International theme of create hope in the world. So I'm so excited. And I don't think I've personally physically met Steve, but he's going to be amazing. So hold on to your knickers. This is going to be a good one. So from the Rotary Club of Fallon, he is a past president. And this is a true story to inspire you all to look within yourselves, your family, your club members, your communities, and see how we can make a difference in the world that we live in. So please, no further ado, welcome Steve Endacott.
All right, thank you, Stacy. Greetings from the high deserts of Fallon, Nevada. I'm Steve Endacott, and I will jump right into this presentation. The person who should really be giving this is a young man who's still overseas doing this project. So let me get it up for you. This project is called the Green Sahel Project, and I'm going to have to explain what a Sahel is. But this project is going to be a lot like the same themes that we've heard from Brent and Robin, where an investment in youth early on has created fantastic results later on that were actually, frankly, unexpected. And then we're going to talk a little bit about grants, but not so much how to get a grant, but how to make a grant work. Some of that behind the scenes, secret sauce, creativity stuff that we've had to come up with. So it's a little bit more of a case study than it is really grants 101, although I'm going to talk a little bit about that. So here we go. So here's our story. It starts with three young individuals, all from Churchill County High School, which is our high school in Fallon, Nevada. The gent on the left is a guy named Eric. The lady in the middle is Maggie, and the gent on the right is Blaine. They were all graduates. They all graduated, I think, within the top 10 of a class of 250. So they were pretty smart kids. The one on the left was an Eagle Scout. The lady in the center was the daughter of the commander of Top Gun. The gent on the right, Blaine, was son of a farmer, president of Future Farmers of America. And so our club sent them all to RILA, and they're actually in 2 different years. And then they all went off to college. And then unbeknownst to any of the other 2, they all ended up joining the Peace Corps. So it sort of embedded that service above self kind of thing. This picture was taken at John F. Kennedy Airport in New York as they're boarding the flight to go to Senegal, Africa. And that's where they united. And neither one of them knew that the other 2 were coming to go do this project. So off they go to Senegal, Africa. Maggie, unfortunately, has an allergic problem over there and had to be evacuated. But Blaine and Eric, and Eric's the one on the left, managed to graduate, learn the language of Pular, which is very difficult to learn. And they start their projects, and they're off and running, and they're having a pretty good time over there. Unfortunately, then the pandemic hits. Oh, I need to tell you where Senegal is. It's all the way across the ocean on the west coast of Africa. And so there you go, thanks to Google Earth. But one of the things that you're going to want to take away from here is what the Sahel is. The Sahel is that transitional area in between the Sahara Desert and the savanna and the jungles to the south. And it's kind of a no man's battleground between arid and climate change and jungles. And it's kind of a tough place to live. It's a little like Fallon, Nevada. That's why Eric likes it, is because it kind of reminds him of home. So the Sahel, as you can see, runs all the way across the entire continent of Africa. And the area of focus for this Rotary project that I'm going to talk about, the Green Sahel, It's in that kind of green circle on the left-hand side there along the Senegalese River. So kind of trying to get you all oriented to what we're trying to do here. If this project is successful, one thing to kind of take away is, and it becomes a good methodology, there's a lot of Sahel left to go work. So this is this could have legs later on down the road. All right, one more little bit of a disclaimer here. I've seen Rotary projects overseas that have a camera crew and make a great documentation or documentary about all the great things the Rotary are doing. This guy, Eric, launched with actually a pretty cheap cell phone, and that's about it. So there's really no big media coverage here. Anything you see is done with a cell phone camera that is not particularly high end and sent over WhatsApp back to the United States, and that's how we're conducting business. I'm kind of the chairman for running the grant for the club. He's the on-site manager for this project, and that's how we've divvied up the work here. So I'm going to let Eric explain what the Sahel is and give you a little bit more of a close-up of what they're dealing with over there.
This is what most of the Sahel looks like. Bunch of short grass, maybe mostly just sand, thorn trees. And then this, if you can see behind me, is the wallow. Now the wallow is basically the land near the river, and that's where most of the people live. There's more trees there, and you know, there's obviously a higher water table, but the area still lacks a lot of biodiversity. It's pretty much just thorn trees.
So that's the environment of the project. And here's kind of how we got this project going. So you'd think this would be a Peace Corps project, but COVID-19 hit, and the United States government, evacuated all 7,000 Peace Corps volunteers from around the world and said, go home and don't get sick. So everybody came home. As soon as travel was sort of back and allowed again, and their vaccines were starting to show up, Eric goes back over there, he says, to go finish this project. The Peace Corps is still not sending people overseas as of today, but Eric decided he's not going to wait. He decided to just go back over, and he calls it Eric Corps. So he goes back to the same village that he was doing his projects in. There he meets an organization called VNGPS, or volunteers, which I'll get into in a bit here, but it's a Senegalese non-government organization. It's not a Rotary club. It's not funded by anybody. It's just kind of a bunch of volunteers. Think of it kind of like the Boy Scouts. So Eric conducts a project feasibility study, and there actually is kind of a format for that. If you go into global grants, you can see what the kinds of things that questions that people who give money to grants want to know the answers to, like who's going to benefit, how are you going to get it done, how are you going to manage it, and there's a lot of things to answer. So he does one of these, comes back to the United States with this teaming, with this potential for teaming with this VNGPS group. So here's a kind of a shot of these folks, and instead of me trying to go through who these folks are, Eric actually can explain it in a minute here. Their leader is a gent called Mamadou Babacar Diop. And the thing to take away from him is he is 2 years in organic permaculture. He speaks English. He's an art teacher. He is very, he's the one who organized this volunteer group. And Eric went to Iowa State and has a degree in agronomy. So you see where these two guys really wanted to get together or talk the same language, even though they're on opposite sides of the world. They both cared about soil, growing plants and trees and food, and what they can do for the environment. So here's who they are, according to Eric.
What is VNGPS? VNGPS is a Senegalese NGO that is basically a network of volunteers all across the Sahel region of Senegal. It's unlike any NGO that I've ever heard of because not a single member gets paid, not even its founder, Mamadou Babacar Diop, because he works full time in addition to doing the projects. All these people, all these volunteers, they love working hard, they love planting trees, and they love the environment. And this makes BNGPS such a great partner for Rotary District 5190, because one of the rules of Rotary is that all money donated has to go to buying materials. None of it can go to overhead or labor.
So Eric paid attention real well at grant school about how to make this stuff work. And there's a lot of organizations out trying to plant trees. I'm not sure if very many of them would be suitable for Rotary partners. I think they suck up an awful lot of money and there's not a lot of boots on the ground. This is all boots on the ground and they're looking for money. So it was a good teaming opportunity here. So Eric comes back to the States again and he pursues a relationship back with his home club of Fallon Rotary. He joins, he proposes a grant, different options of how to fund a project over there. Briefs over 24 clubs in Northern Nevada and a little bit in California. 8 clubs sign on to his project and they're listed there below to the right. And they decide to pursue a multi-club grant. It's not a global grant, it's not a club grant, and I'll get into that in a second, but the total money that he came up with was $35,450. So what are the project goals? So here they are enumerated here. Number 1, it's to build a community farm. By the way, a lot of this is kind of the old philosophy, don't give a guy a fish, teach him how to fish. And this is the teach him how to fish part. You build a large community farm. It's about 22 acres in a town called Fonda Elamon. And it's where a lot of indigenous farmers, it's kind of a hub for them to get together and buy fertilizer and sell wares and whatever. And what this is going to be is basically a experimental farm and training facility to teach permaculture. And permaculture it's kind of like organic farming. It's how to do more with less, and particularly less commercial fertilizer. So a lot of composting, a lot of crop rotation, a lot of some of the basic things that maybe local farmers don't have a real strong grasp on, and trying to stretch their resources farther. Now, why do they need to do that? Well, this is right out of don't have to believe me, Steve Endacott, read the Wall Street Journal. Fertilizer prices have surged all around the world, and particularly gotten worse because of the war in Ukraine. And they're actually calling it's like a scary movie if you read the article. And this is a quote from somebody there. In his 9 years selling fertilizer to corn and rice farmers from West Africa and all into Asia, has never seen such a severe supply crunch and such high prices. So basically, the farmers in this particular part of the world in Africa have gotten a real strong whammy that they're spending more on fertilizer, keeping less of their crop, less of any of their profits. So this is why there's a learning of permaculture or training of permaculture component to this project. The second goal has to do more with food stability and climate change in the area. And this is a little bit out of the box. Their goal is to plant 16,000 fruit trees along a 400-kilometer river in the Sahel, in that green area I showed you earlier. And they started buying tree saplings, and then they would cost about $1.50 to $2 a piece. They found that they could grow their own for about 35 cents if they just got the seeds. They had a small nursery that produced about 3,000 saplings, and now they have their goal was to increase the nursery output to about 16,000 a year. So this isn't just this year 16,000. The goal is to have 16,000 per year for the foreseeable future. And why are they doing that? They're trying to, the overall goals are to slow the Sahel desertification moving south, increase the biodiversity along that river there, combat climate change, combat malnutrition by providing sources of food to the locals, and in that also enhancing financial stability. Now, if you go into the grant module and look at what are the focuses of Rotary for the environment, you'll see all of those types of things listed. So this was an easy match to sell, because we're just basically repeating right back what the focus of Rotary entails. Just one more quick thing about this, the fruit trees. This is not an orchard. This is donating trees to willing participants. So they're going to schools, they're going to communities, and they're going to individuals, and they're going for free. You got to dig the hole, you got to water the tree, you got to look after it, you got to keep the goats away, you got to build a little fence or whatever around it. This is your tree, okay? All the fruit is yours, and do with it what you want. And we don't care if you sell it or if you eat it, but there you go. The types of trees are mango, banana, lemon, and orange, and all of them are already doing well in that area. So that was kind of part of that feasibility study. We're not giving them some sort of fruit that's going to fail. So here's that initial small nursery that they started with, and then now they've gotten themselves up to 16,000 that are ready to go to be planted later on this summer, about July. So what's Rotary's role? Well, when you run a grant, you got to do a bunch of things. You got to create a support system and align with the international global environmental areas of focus, which we talked about. Team with a credible in-country partner, and we think we've done that. Assist with the funding of the project. Well, that gets interesting when you're trying to ship money overseas. And we found that that was an interesting challenge, but we figured out how to work with a bank that's actually in Senegal. You have to provide the resources and the oversight of the resources and the accountability, because guess what? Rotary wants receipts, which is an interesting problem considering you're in a country where most people do things with a handshake. So you have to be creative in some areas to make sure that that works. And then you want to leave a legacy that's sustainable in the years to come. It's not a one-time fix. So there are three kinds of grants, really kind of a small, medium, and large. You can tailor these to the kind of project you have. That's already been discussed this morning. The one that we picked was the multi-club grant, and that was because we could not find a Rotary club in Senegal, Africa to work this project with. So that's why we teamed with VNGPS, and we didn't go global. I think we could have maybe sold this as a global grant, but this was our first one. So we went for what we thought we could get done, and that was the medium-sized multi-club grant. Your club donates 25,000, that's the maximum. You get other clubs to do the same up to that amount, and then you get a match of $1.33 per dollar that you submit. And Bill Boone does a great, he was the one that trained me, did a great Zoom training course. You get it done in under 2 hours, and it's really good. It was just what we needed to hear, and it got us kick-started in the right direction. So this is what the mechanics look like. You get one club that's the lead, a bunch of other partners. They all donate to 5190. There's a form they got to sign to do that. You get some district grant match. You got to wait around for that to get approved at Rotary International, but that occurs. So then it goes to the lead club. The lead club has to figure out how to make it work. It goes to, we just ended up providing resources, and then basically Eric went back overseas and is there now as the on-site project manager, which is why he's not here to give this presentation. He's there you go. He's just, you have to have somebody who can do that function while you're over there. Just a few reminders: no Rotarians can receive or any of this funds, nor can their relatives. It can't be given to another organization, so none of this money is given to VNGPS. It's just used to buy resources, and you can't buy land. Well, there was no land in that 22 acres that was donated, and nothing was purchased. So what are they doing with the resources? Well, first we have to track the purchases. And then how do we, these are the challenges we had. You got to track the purchases. You got to move the equipment up and down a 400-kilometer river. You got to track the trees and where the trees are going, because we think this will be a good follow-on study down the road. How well did this really work? How well were the trees maintained? Did it do anything for the environment? How do you manage the volunteers? How do you live in a developing country as a Rotarian with no resources? And then how do you tell the story when you're done or as you're going along. So I'll touch on each one of those real briefly here. So how do you track? We actually just made purchase agreements and receipts. We designed them. We wrote them in Pular, in French, and in English. So when something is purchased and whoever you purchase it from, a gas station, a tire shop, whatever, you have at least something that can be filled out and tracked. And then once we do that, we take that cheap cell phone, we take a picture of it, and we archive it with both on site, and they send it back here for safekeeping as well, and also in the cloud. And we keep track of what it is in both the French francs and also in US dollars. And then we also in the lower right hand corner take a picture of whatever it was we bought, just to keep it straight. So that's the pumps that they bought to pump water out of the river for the permaculture garden. They needed some wheels. This is the how do you move supplies up and down a 400-kilometer river, and they just needed a truck. And so they found a used one in Dakar, which is the capital. That's about a 10-hour bus trip away. And it took about 3 days to shop for one, and about 14 days at the DMV to get it registered. And you thought ours was bad. Eric made sure that he was not in the eyesight when the negotiations were going on, because I think if they saw him coming, that the price would have gone up. But that's something he learned, and they worked out while they were over there. If you don't have a truck like this, you end up taking local transportation, and this is what that kind of looks like. And Eric has had to do a lot of this. It's basically your minivan, but it's not only your people transportation, it's part of the supply chain. If you look at the roof, because who your buddies are on any of your trips are these guys usually, and they don't take the same rest stops that you do. So you have to keep your hands inside the window. Okay, so back to Senegal. You can see the trees were kind of distributed, not evenly, but where centers of activities were schools, villages, and individuals that would take care of the trees. Now, how do we keep track of where they are? Once they're given to an individual or a school or a community, there's actually in this little cheap cell phone is an app in there where you can take pictures of the tree, the people with the tree, and it generates a map of where it is and geo coordinates. So, and these are all also archived, just like the receipts are all archived. And so maybe 2, 3, 5 years ago, we go back, somebody goes back and says, how did this really work? And how are those trees producing? So, the next round of saplings are growing, they build the perma farm, and here's how some of that looks like with cell phone photography here. And they had a lot of volunteers show up. A lot of women showed up too, and you see them using sledgehammers, and so everyone's working pretty hard over there. I'm not sure the standing on the oil drum is the OSHA way to pound in stakes, but again, we're over in the third world country. Eric stays in what we call the 2 seasons hotel. The rainy season is the pup tent, the dry season is the mosquito netting, and this is pretty much how he was living when he was with the Peace Corps. So he doesn't know the difference, so nobody tell him. And he's just fine with this. All right, so how do we get the word out? We're kind of wrapping this up here, and because we're going to close the grant out at the end of this month, and then of course reports due at the end of June. We did put a pretty good letter. He wrote it overseas and sent it in to the district, and we got a pretty nice spread in the district newsletter in December. There was also a podcast in January where Eric and Mamadou were both interviewed by the PIO for District 5190. When he gets back, probably the middle of next month, he plans on out briefing with all the clubs that donated and contributed, and he'll be hopping in the car and driving to go visit some of these different clubs, and more than happy to go total open kimono on what was going on over there. We're looking at some maybe some funding options down the road, but there's some rules with Rotary. You know, once you do a project, it's kind of done. You don't come back and say, well, we want to do another year of the same thing. And so and that's fine. I think there's other organizations that can kind of maybe either take this over, or maybe this is just see if the Senegalese can run with this for a while. So without being heavily supported. And we think we've left them legacy to do that. So we're not overly concerned about that. And then maybe some media projects for just like was discussed earlier, Rotary Showcase or any other forum. And so again, putting just our thinking caps on, we ran into a young lady named Kelsey Kibbe, and she's here in Fernley, which is a town about 30 minutes down the road. And she's in their Rotary Club, and she happens to run a kind of a web media site or media business. And she's donated a bunch of her time to just kind of said, look, give me some of that really grainy stuff that you sent from Senegal and a few pictures, and maybe I can turn that into something that's a little bit more glitzy and then can be narrated. And so here, this is just a sample of what she's doing. And I just present it not so much to advertise her, but to say you can start with minimal media and maybe eventually, you know, get into something that's a little bit more accessible and people will watch it. Okay, so that was about 45 seconds of a 5-minute sample she put together. And when Eric gets back, he plans on sitting down with her and telling maybe a couple of different stories on how this program went, maybe a long version and a short version. So that's our plan so far. I guess in conclusion here, one of the things that inspired us, and we actually do read the Rotary magazine up here in Nevada, back in September of 22, our international president, Jennifer Jones, put out a pretty good article. She was talking about doing some projects in South America. And this is one reason we kind of think that we're in sync with our international president and are on the right course here, because she says, this adventure reminds me of the two important truths about Rotary. One is we rely on local on-the-ground expertise to do what we do best. And two, sometimes you have to take some uncomfortable chances to reach important goals. So we kind of think we nailed her sentence here by getting a little out of the box and relying heavily on VNGPS over in Senegal, Africa. So I'll just relay for Eric and for VNGPS and the Senegalese people, to anyone who listened to this and inspired by it and anyone who supported it, thank you. And thank you for your time this morning.
What an absolutely amazing project, Steve. And we greatly appreciate you sharing. The takeaways for me were Eric came from RILA, a program that many of our clubs support and send students to. And to know that some of the students that we are sending, actually almost all of them, are making a difference in our communities. And from this, we can see they made a difference internationally. So absolutely wonderful. And I'm sure that all the clubs are going to be reaching out to you to have you come in and see if you can Zoom speak to them or come and personally speak. And maybe we can get Eric to come and share this with some of the clubs and create a stage 2. And I will have you know that the grants chair, Bill Boone, chimed in briefly when you were speaking, and he gave you kudos because you had to develop a lot of processes, as this was a very strategic club. So your club did absolutely wonderful. And thank you so much for sharing.
Well, my pleasure. And again, we'll probably have Eric do this. I think this is important for him to do. And we just got to give him a month to get back into the country.